Joining us on the line is Senator Ted Cruz, Senator for the state of Texas. Senator Cruz, great to talk to you.
Ben, always good to be with you. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing okay. So why don't we start with the two big controversies of the day involving you? There are two of them today. So, I mean, it's a day ending in Y, so that's not unusual. Let's begin with the more fun controversy. That, of course, is the controversy in which you have claimed that many of the worst villains in movies are environmentalists. Now, I have to say, this was a claim first put forth not by you, but by Sonny Bunch, who has written for a variety of outlets, including the Washington Free Beacon. And it was actually made in the pages of the Washington Post. It happens to be fairly inarguable. There are just a bevy of movies where the villain is an environmentalist who does not like human beings. Make the case.
Well, it's very simple, which is that if you look at the extreme left, they view humanity as a pestilence. And then the two examples I pointed to were in Avengers Endgame, where you have Thanos, and then in Watchmen, where you have Ozymandias. And in both instances, they view too many people on planet Earth as a problem, and their solution is kill as many of them as possible. And so when it comes to, you think of the pivotal scene in Avengers Endgame, where Thanos snaps. He snaps his finger, and half the people on Earth instantly disappear. They just cease to exist. And that to them is a good outcome. And you think about, look, it's one of the real differences between left and right. Do you view humanity as a good thing or bad thing? Do you view the birth of a child as a good thing or bad thing? Do you look at a person and say, what is this person's capacity? What is their future? What can they contribute? What art can they produce? What poetry can they write? What jobs can they create? What can they do to improve the world? Or do you look at them and say, this is another consumer of food, of water, of air, and it is another cost on Earth? So, and Watchmen, you have the same thing, where Ozymandias wants to do exactly the same thing. And the funny thing is, so I said this on the latest episode of Verdict, and the left has been going crazy. And what's funny is so we had some leftists that tweet out a clip yesterday and think that this was incredibly damning. And I retweeted it. I'm like, yep, great. That's exactly right. That's how you view humanity. And it goes back to the Malthusian foibles of there are too many people on Earth. It's not true. People are a wonderful, blessed gift from God, and we should be thrilled with them.
Senator Cruz, let's move on to the other controversy of the day, which obviously is a lot more upsetting and more important, I think, for the nature of the country going forward. That is this tweet that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sent at you the other day. She's been making the case consistently that because you and Senator Hawley voted to object to electors during the certification process, that you are now responsible for attempted murder. So the other day, you agreed with her on Twitter that there needed to be an investigation into Robinhood's decision to block retail investors from purchasing stock. It turns out now that there's fairly good evidence at this point that the reason that Robinhood did that was not because they were trying to target small investors, but because they had margin requirements. Those margin requirements were exceeded because there were high-risk stocks being traded, et cetera, et cetera. But you suggested that an investigation might be necessary, and she responded that she was happy to work with Republicans on this issue, but, quote, you almost had me murdered 3 weeks ago, so you can sit this one out. Happy to work with almost any other GOP that aren't trying to get me killed. How do you respond to the absurd allegation that you were trying to have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez murdered?
Well, unfortunately, the left has lost their mind, and this is a great example of that. We've got an instance for the last 4 years with Donald Trump as president. Democrats and the media, they've been consumed by an all-abiding hatred for him, and it's driven them over the edge. And this is a great example where on the issue of Robinhood, look, my view when it comes to stock trading is that the same rules ought to apply to everyone, that it shouldn't be one rule for the rich and powerful. It shouldn't be one rule for politically connected hedge funds in New York City and another rule for the ordinary investor. It ought to be everybody. You ought to be able to lose your money or win your money. You ought to be able to play by the same rules. And so that was the point I made. And she responded just by a whole series of tweets where she like just lost it and said, you tried to have me killed. Now, look, on the substance, it's ridiculous. There was a terror attack at the Capitol on January 6th. I was there. She was there. We both law enforcement stepped in and stopped the terrorists. Tragically, one policeman lost his life that day. But that terror attack was horrific. It needs to be prosecuted. Violence is always, always wrong. And one of the rich ironies of this is AOC and the left. They actually have a long history of cheering on terror attacks. We spent all of last year practically with Antifa and BLM riots, with police officers being murdered, with our cities on fire, with stores being looted and burned and torn to the ground, with police cars being firebombed. And the Democrats were cheering that on. They were celebrating. They were saying, go do more of this. I mean, it was truly unhinged. Back then, both you and I, and we did shows together then, we said violence is wrong. You got a First Amendment right to speak? Yes. But that right ends when you commit violence against anybody else. My view is very simple. Violence is always, always, always wrong, whether you're left wing, right wing, or have no wings whatsoever. And I think AOC's unhinged comment, it's a combination of being emotionally frazzled because of hatred of Donald Trump, but it's also, and we're seeing this, it is living out Rahm Emanuel's dictum that you never let a good crisis go to waste, because we're seeing the left use the terror attack of January 6th to try to destroy everyone they hate. The analogy I've done before is it's like the end of every Godfather movie, where at the end of every movie, Michael Corleone settles his debt and tries to eliminate all of his enemies. That's what the Democrats are doing. So you look at all this impeachment nonsense. They're trying to destroy Donald J. Trump because they hate him. They're trying to destroy me. They're trying to destroy every conservative, every one of your listeners. If you're conservative, if you voted for Trump, they are trying to take the 75 million people who voted for Trump and define them as evil, racist, bigoted rubes who should be erased from society. And it is cynical, it is political, it is craven, and it ain't going to work.
Now, Senator Cruz, one of the other efforts to do that these days is the attempt to smear the entire Republican Party with the conspiracy theorizing of Marjorie Taylor Greene. We've seen a bevy of editorials in the past week or so going over all of the bizarre, strange, conspiratorial, and loony things that this first-term backbencher from Georgia has said. And the implication from the entire media is that everybody on the right believes everything that Marjorie Taylor Greene has said. And if you don't want her expelled from Congress, if you want her subjected to the wrath of the voters, which is normally the way that you do this sort of stuff, unless somebody has committed a crime in Congress or even said something so wild while a congressperson that they require censure or expulsion. If you are not in favor of expulsion, but you still say that what she is saying or has said in the past is insane and non-representative of the Republican Party, that the goal of the media seemed to be to paint the entire Republican Party as the Capitol rioters or backers of the conspiracy thinking of Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's pretty obvious the game that's being played.
Look, that's exactly right. When it comes to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't know her. As far as I know, I've never met her. From what I've seen, some of the things she said are really pretty out there and pretty loopy. But you pointed out the obvious solution to that, which is if someone embraces positions that are nuts, the voters have a recourse. And, one of the rich ironies is while the left is seeking to erase and destroy everyone they disagree, they're claiming, and this is one brief moment in time, they'll forget it in about 12 seconds, they're claiming to be defenders of democracy. Now, the left, as a general matter, doesn't like democracy, doesn't care about democracy. They'd much rather just rule through totalitarian edict. On issue after issue after issue, they don't like the voters to decide. They don't like the voters to have the right to decide contested policy issues. It's one of the reasons the left likes judicial activism, because if you get 5 unelected lawyers to decree a policy outcome you like, why bother with 330 million Americans and actually convincing them and getting them to vote? But here's the irony on this. They claim to be defending democracy, and what's their solution? They want her thrown out of Congress. Why? Because the damn voters voted for her. Like that, for some reason, this discussion today seems to be the movie episode, but it reminds me of my favorite movie, The Princess Bride. You keep on using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Like you don't get to defend democracy and say our major objective is prevent the voters from voting for someone we don't like. You look at impeachment. What is the outcome they want in this impeachment trial, which I think is an enormous waste of time that the Democrats are getting ready to force the Senate to go through. But the outcome they want is to prohibit Trump from ever running again. And if you listen to why they want it, they say, because the voters might vote for him. You're not defending democracy if you're trying to say our number one objective is prevent the voters from casting their votes in a way that we don't like.
You know, Senator Cruz, it seems to me that the strongest case against voting for conviction in the Senate is that Trump's behavior does not rise to the level of legal incitement under any legal interpretation of which I know. The Democrats convicted him in the House, not under some sort of vague abuse of power charge, which theoretically you could uphold perhaps, but under an incitement standard that half of Congress has violated. And it's kind of amazing to me to watch many of the people using deliberately inflammatory language today suggest that Trump needs to be convicted in the Senate for using deliberately inflammatory language a month ago.
Well, see, the mistake you made in that question is you actually asked it as a lawyer, and you asked it based on substance. You asked it based on reason. And what the Democrats are doing is not a question of law. It's not a question of substance. It's not a question of reason. It is a question of id and a cathartic primal scream. They hate Trump. It's actually one of the challenges now that they have a Democratic White House and Democratic majorities in both houses. Is for 4 years, their party has not really been defined by substance. It's been defined by hatred of one person. This impeachment had nothing to do with actually what Trump said or did. It had to do with expressing their rage. It's why the House impeached him in hours, I think 56 hours, something like that. I mean, it was not based on hearings, not based on evidence. By the way, in the history of our country, that has never happened, 0 times. But like there have been houses of one party and presidents of another. And in over 2 centuries, we've never done what the House has done, which is in a few hours, impeach the other guy because you hate him. That's what they did. Like the impeachment a year ago, and I have to admit, it feels like my calendar doesn't say it's Groundhog Day, but it feels like Groundhog Day because a year ago, last January, we were doing the exact same thing, another impeachment. And the whole Ukraine thing, that wasn't a violation of law. They were angry with him. And listen, a lot of these Democrats said they wanted to impeach Trump in November and December of 2016, right after he'd been elected, before he'd been sworn in. He hadn't done anything. So this impeachment is not actually connected to facts or substance. They hate him, and they view impeachment. They're willing to rationalize whatever they're doing by saying the ends justify the means, because this is going after the evil one. Whatever they do is fine. In the Senate, listen, my view about it, you talked about the simplest and best reason to reject this impeachment trial. My simplest reason is, listen, he's no longer in office. It's a waste of time. This is not about, the impeachment mechanism was designed to remove someone who'd committed high crimes or misdemeanors from office. He's gone. Joe Biden is there. I didn't vote for Joe Biden. You didn't vote for Joe Biden, but Trump is no longer in office. This is vindictiveness and pettiness. And frankly, given the challenges we have in this country, given the tens of millions of people out of work, we ought to be focused on getting people back to work and not wasting our time with the Democrats' efforts to engage in political attacks.
Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, good to talk to you.
Thank you, Ben. God bless.